and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the bluegrass situation. I'm your host, Cindy Howes, and thanks for finding us today. We have the legendary Loudon Wainwright III on the podcast today. That's right, big day here at Basic Folk. Before we get into that, let's talk about ways that we can stay in touch. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter at the link in the show notes, or you can go to basicfolk.com. Once a month email lands in your inbox and lets you know what is going on with your favorite Lil Folk pod. Again, link in the show notes, or you can go to basicfolk.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at Basic Folk on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky. You can find all those links in the show notes. That is also where you can find out how you can contribute to Basic Folk. We are a listener-funded podcast. You can give $5 a month and get a Basic Folk beanie that's handmade by my mom with a very sweet little Basic Folk tag on it. That's right. Link in the show notes or basicfolk.com. Coming up next week on Basic Folk, we're going to start releasing our 4 Kayamo recorded episodes. We'll do Ani DeFranco and Carsey Blanton. Had a great conversation with those two on board Kayamo. And then every week for the next 4 weeks after that, we'll release a different interesting and exciting episode. I am very happy because all of my travel that's been happening since February and March has died down, and now I can just sit in one place and work on my Basic Folk spreadsheet. Great. Okay, let's get to Loudon Wainwright III, whose career has spanned over 5 decades, and he is known for his deeply personal songwriting, sharp wit, and of course, oversharing. The patriarch of the Wainwright folk dynasty, which includes Rufus, Martha, and their late mother, Kate McGarrigle, as well as Lucy Wainwright Roche and her mother, Suzzy Roche, Loudon reflects on the balance between oversharing and maintaining privacy in his music. He candidly discusses the line he draws when writing about family and how his experiences with grief has shaped his art, and I'm proud to say I think that we found a line that Loudon Wainwright III would not cross in our conversation. He was very gracious about it and listened on to hear history in the making on Basic Folk. We discuss his latest live album, Loudon Live in London, and his unique ability to unsettle and surprise his listeners during performances. We talk about his late father and namesake, Loudon Wainwright Jr., the famous writer for Life magazine, who is in everything LW3 does. We also dive into his early days, including insights on his debut album, thanks to a recent essay by Morrissey, yes, that Morrissey, that highlights its significance. Moz points out that Wainwright has the pep and readiness of someone who knows we will all soon be skeletons in his early 20s. After reading Loudon's very detailed memoir, Liner Notes, I had to ask him about his relationship to memory and also his reputation for memory. Loudon also touches on his acting career, revealing how roles in popular films, especially Big Fish and Knocked Up, have introduced him to new audiences. He also reveals that he was at the Newport Folk Festival where Dylan went electric, history, and most definitely shares his memories of that fateful day. We'll check out this live album from Loudon Wainwright III, a clip of the song Out of This World, which features his number one son, Rufus Wainwright, and then we'll get to our conversation with Loudon Wainwright III on Basic Folk.
Hello. It's almost time now. It's almost over. Sooner than later I'll be dead and gone out of this world. Out of this world. guess that I'll miss some of the good times, but it'll be fine for me to be moving on out of this world, out of this world. Out of this world and into another, a kinder world, a world that's better. Out of this world.
Loudon Wainwright III, what a thrill. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Nice to meet and see and talk to you.
Let's do this. I have a reputation for having kind of long setups for questions, but I'll give you a warning when it's a long one. I can't help myself, and I don't know. If you have any advice on how to undo that, please let me know.
I don't have advice about anything.
All right. Well, let's start with oversharing. You are a big oversharer, but what's the line for you when it comes to privacy? Do you wish you were more private, less private? Is there anything that you admire in people who are really private?
Well, I think I know what you're talking about in terms of, writing about personal things, family, relationships, kids, parents, siblings. It's been a waterfront that I've covered for 50 years. And so it's just it's my nature to write about all those things and people and that stuff. In terms of crossing a line or going overboard, I like to get close to the line. There are some times where I've said, no, I won't write about that or sing about that. But the deciding factor for me is if the song is good, or if I deem the song good. And by good, I mean that it will have an effect on the listener. They'll be able to relate to what it is that I'm singing about. There's a strong possibility they might, because if I'm writing about families, they have families. So they will know what I'm talking about. It's not like, oh, what's he talking about? My Thanksgiving dinner is much like yours. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah. So the other thing I'm wondering, if there is anything that you have written that you have regretted down the line, and maybe did that hinder writing moving forward? Like, has anyone ever confronted you on that?
I don't think so. I mean, you'd have to ask the people that might be offended, but and in terms of writing songs about kids, my kids who are now all grown-ups, 3 out of my 4 kids are singer-songwriters, and they've written their own songs or their own, and in some cases their own rebuttals, or their versions of said Thanksgiving dinner or situation. So it's just the nature of the way it is. We're all pretty used to it by now.
Morrissey recently wrote an essay on how much he loves your debut album, released in 1971 when you were 23, 24. It's not very, I found it not very easy writing to follow. Did you read the essay?
I read some of it. I don't think, I'm glad he liked the record. And I didn't know that he was a fan of that record, but it pleased me.
So what did you of the writing that you read of it? Here's the last line of the essay for people who haven't read this, just so you know. So this is how he ends the essay. It wasn't the case that he followed 1970 with failure, but the scholastic pride of life is caught in a thought-smashing way on this irradiant debut. Like an old hangdog hound, it stays beside me, dolefully looking up occasionally to make sure that I'm still here, and I still am. I read that essay 3 times, and the whole thing is like that.
Gee, I didn't get that or I didn't, that last bit I hadn't heard.
I like the Old Hang Dog Hound, the record.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
So a Morrissey observation, he said, his is the pep and readiness of someone who knows we will all soon be skeletons. And he's writing about you when you were in your early 20s.
Yeah.
These days, I have read and heard you say that you want to make the best of your remaining time connecting with your children and your family. But what were your thoughts on your own death back then at the release of your debut album?
Well, the first line in the first song on that first record is "in Delaware when I was younger." So that's an indication that I was at least aware of my own mortality, up and coming. Now I'm 78, so it's been a long haul. But I've had my eye on that particular ball since the beginning of my career. When I was 22 or 3 or however old I was, and I was writing those songs, I had no idea of what I was doing. I mean, I was trying to say something, and fortunately, something came out, or through me, or into me, or out of me. Even now, I don't. The process of writing songs for me still remains a great mystery. I've just finished a song about our cat died 3 weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I'm sure you know, and I'm sure your listeners know, it's huge,
Yeah.
But what I've written about that is mysterious to me. I mean, it's powerful, as you might expect, but also surprising. So there's always this element of surprise with songwriting with me, and it's been there since the get-go.
Another question about thinking about death. Your mother died in 1997. So when your children's mother, Rufus and Martha's mother, Kate McGarrigle, died in 2010, what was it like to experience your children's grief for Kate? Was there anything you could share with them about grief for a mother that you had experienced?
Well, in the case of my own mother, who was, a huge support for me as a young person growing up, and always encouraging, and I was kind of I was devastated when my mother died. I just kind of went into a spin and stopped doing, I lost 20 pounds and didn't write songs and couldn't get out of bed. It was that level of grief and depression. Fortunately, with time and some help, I got past that. But in terms of Kate's death, Rufus, Kate and I had a kind of wild and crazy marriage, but we remained pretty separate after we divorced back in we split up in 76 and were divorced in 79, and didn't really, we're not close at all. But Rufus wanted me to come up to Montreal and be there with them for that huge event, the death of Kate. And I went. I was actually in the house along with the kids. Rufus and Martha were there, and other family members and friends were there. And I'm so glad I went. She herself was kind of in a coma practically, and it wasn't like I could have any kind of say anything to her. But I was glad I was there for the kids, and it was gigantic for them. And big. It's all big stuff.
Yeah. I listened to your book, Liner Notes. You did the narration. I was on vacation last week, and I listened to it on the beach. It was really nice to go along with the scenery. But I was amazed at the incredible details in the book. And it made me wonder, what is your memory like? What is your relationship with memory? What is your reputation with memory?
You mean the things I remembered in my memoir?
In general.
Yeah, well, my memory is flagging. I think I remember your name. Cindy, right?
That's right.
Whoa, I'm a winner today. There's a lot I don't remember, and I'm constantly grabbing my phone to try to remember the name of such and such a Ingmar Bergman movie made in 1956. things like that. Whereas before I could just, get it. But in terms of my own life, I mean, I remember my version of life. I've staked out the highlights, the ups and the downs and the boring stretches, and whether or not it's accurate, I don't know. There's a thing on my new live record. It's called Roman Numeral, and it's a kind of spoken piece about the Roman numeral 3 at the end of my name, and it's followed by a new song called "Posthumously Yours." So, and that explores again the subject we're talking about. Gee, I hope we're not going to talk about death for the whole hour, but this what happens and what you can remember and what the past and the ever dwindling future. But I'm always trying to remember where the hell I put my glasses too.
Yeah. About that song, Roman numeral, you talk about how your dad strongly urged you to use the Roman numeral 3 so there wouldn't be any confusion. And then you went on to use your preppy and pretentious full legal name with its Roman numeral tag. So I feel like this might warrant its own interview series, but how have you come to relate to your name?
Well, Loudon is such a kind of, it's a strange name. It's an unusual name. Not many people who have it, particularly as a first name. So as a kid, I wanted to be called Bob or Jack or, Joe even. But I kind of hated my name. And my nickname was Loudy, which no one is allowed to call me except my closest friends.
And Liza Minnelli.
That's right. But as I got older, I it's a beautiful name, actually. And I could be wrong, but I think it might have a Scottish, it might be derived from some. There's a place in Glasgow. Actually, I was just in Glasgow about a week ago called Loudon Terrace. So I like to think that over that Loudon is, I'm related to it. But my dad was Loudon, and his dad was Loudon. They, when Rufus, was going to appear on the scene, my grandmother wanted to call him Loudon the Fourth, but fortunately, we decided not to do that.
So you don't recommend it as a name?
Three is, 3 strikes and you're out. Okay. But it's a beautiful name. I mean, the Roman numeral tag, which is what what that little thing on the record is about, that's a whole other issue. But I talk about it on the record.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, about the record, you have written so much about your dad, released so many songs about your relationship. I was listening out for him on the new live album, but I'm not sure if I found him. Is your dad in everything you do? Where is he for you these days? How do you continue to connect and learn from him?
Well, I'm an incarnation of my father. I mean, so he's with me all the time. There's a song of mine called "Surviving Twin," which also became the kind of title track on a theater piece that I created a couple of years ago. It's about the fact that we're kind of the same person, which of course that's an idea that would horrify me as a young person, but I think this can happen. People that they become their parents. So my dad isn't on the record a lot, although he is in the Roman numeral piece. But
that's right. Doy.
He's in everything. He's a real presence, and my mother is too.
I wanted to ask you about your mom's sense of humor, that you kind of touch upon it in liner notes, and I feel like it has a lot to do with your sense of humor. As a kid, you would actually study comedy records, and there's a really lovely chapter in the book about how you loved watching your dad lose his mind laughing. So it seems like of your parents, and I could be totally wrong here, your mom was kind of the secret funny one. She would use phrases that you still use, in the book you mentioned, "I'll be dog tired," or "I'll be dogged, I'm bone tired."
Yeah.
And these phrases are hilarious.
Yeah, they're hilarious, and they're also very Southern. You know, my mother was from South Georgia, this little town near the Florida border called Tifton, Georgia. And so dog tired or bone tired she used a lot of, she kind of, when she came up north to live with my dad, she kind of tried to iron out her Southern accent, but it would leak out. And I loved because that was that was who she was. You know, my dad grew up on Long Island and from a kind of blue blood background, you could say. And she was just white trash from South Georgia. But and she did have a great sense of humor. He did too. Both my parents were funny and loved laughter and comedy.
And thinking about the comedy records that you would listen to when you were like practicing your routines, those comedians were like the silly guys, and you didn't feel comfortable impersonating edgier experimental comedians. But what about cynicism in your humor? Like, when did that show up for you, and where does it live now?
Well, it's been there quite a bit. I mean, you know, another person that talked about comedy people and cynicism and influences and my dad's record collection, Tom Lehrer. There's a Tom Lehrer song on this new record. I mean, you look like you're pretty young. I imagine you are, but Tom Lehrer is still alive. First of all, that's the exciting news. I saw him actually a couple of months ago. I visited him in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's 97. And his kind of cynicism or skepticism in his songs delighted my father. You know, he came on the scene in the late 50s, you know, in the Eisenhower pre-Kennedy time. And all of a sudden, this irreverent voice singing and playing the piano, I mean, it was just spectacular. And my dad loved those records, and I loved them as a really young person. So it's a kind of full circle that I recorded his song Oedipus Rex, and also that I got to meet him. My favorite Tom Lehrer, that afternoon we were in his apartment in Cambridge, and you know, when you're with somebody who's 97, you invariably want to ask them, what's it like to be 97? Or how did you get to be 97? Or what's the secret about, or what's the thing about being that old? And he said, the great thing about getting to be this old is less peer pressure. And that to me is, he's rocking. Tom continues to rock.
I was talking to, so you went to school in Pittsburgh for a little bit, and you, I think, have continued to come back there. I actually used to live in Pittsburgh for 15 years, and I worked at a radio station that you might be familiar with, WYEP, or maybe not, but my former colleague we were talking about this interview today, and she went on about Tom Lehrer. So you're right. I didn't hear about him before I listened to Loudon live in London, but I will be looking it up later on.
Oh, the records are just, and the YouTube videos, the live, he did these concerts in, I think it was in Denmark, for these young kind of coat and tie Danish people, young people. And God, they're so great. I mean, I recommend them highly.
Speaking of looking back, sentimentality is my next subject. You are fairly sentimental, especially as you age. Do you agree? And how has that changed for you as you've gotten older?
Despite having once written a song called "The Man That Couldn't Cry," I mean, I seem to be able to cry at the drop of a hat. I don't know if that's. I think it has something to do with being older. Maybe because you just, you know, you kind of relax a little about, you know, about feeling stuff or welcoming those kind of feelings. Whereas maybe you know, men in particular, of course, have this problem. When you're younger, you bottle it up. I mean, it's a big issue and problem. But, you know, I talk about visiting my father in the hospital and when he was dying, and we'd be sitting in this room, and the television would be kind of, you know, it's higher up than it normally is in a hospital. And a beer commercial would come on. My father would burst into tears. You know, I mean, your emotions are more accessible, I think, as you get older. And And that's true with me. Wait till you hear this cat song. Oh my goodness.
I probably can't hear it without crying too. My wife is a gerontologist, and she's like, no one cries more than my male patients.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah.
Let it out.
Listen, guys, it's a bit much. If you could just hang on. I'm just kidding. Mm-hmm. Ego. Age has a way of reining in the ego. Have you found that to be true?
That's a nice idea. I mean, my little ego, though, it's pretty, even at this point, it may be quiet, but it's ready to kick and scream at any moment. You know, it is like a little child that is still very forceful. You know, on a good day, I'm the greatest. And then on a not so great day, I can be a piece of shit. But my ego is still still there.
You originally wanted to be an actor. We talked about you went to CMU for acting in Pittsburgh. You have had some really wonderful acting gigs. MASH kicked it all off in 1974. And then you really started ramping it up in the 2000s you've had some parts in between MASH and the year 2000, but there was a really strong string of Knocked Up, Big Fish, Undeclared. How did all those parts from like the year 2000 on impact your career?
Well, in terms of Undeclared and Knocked Up, Judd Apatow, who created Undeclared and directed and wrote Knocked Up, and the 40-year-old version, which I have a very small part in. You know, he was a fan of mine when he was a 14-year-old kid and living in Syosset, Long Island. I think he saw me on the David Letterman show, and he liked it. And then he started to come to my shows. I mean, he would come into the city as a teenager and see me play at this kind of legendary club in New York called The Bottom Line. So years go by, and then I get this phone call or this email or something from this guy that I never even heard of called Judd Apatow, who did this show called Freaks and Geeks. And he wanted to hire me. He was a fan of my music, and he thought I would be a good character in this show that he was developing called Undeclared. The character of Hal, the dysfunctional father. What a stretch. But Judd has come through for me, as you mentioned, beginning in the early 2000s. He continues to use my songs. Sometimes just recently he did a big show with Mike Birbiglia. I'm dropping names now, in New York, and I got to be a guest on that. And Judd has just become a friend and a huge supporter. And so a lot of my acting career in the last couple of decades has to do with Judd. Big Fish was a Tim Burton movie that I just auditioned for and got. I occasionally get acting jobs. It's great fun when I get them. I don't really have an agent, or I try as hard as I probably should, but it's always fun to get an acting job.
Did it introduce you to like a new generation of fans, or change who was coming to your shows? Yeah, well, yeah. In terms of the Undeclared thing, that's I'd be on the CD signing CDs, and all of a sudden this 30-year-old person would be standing there saying, "I'm a huge fan of Undeclared," and which is of course a thrill. So yes, it's a way of. But I always say, "Oh, look, a young person," and then the grumpy old geezers kind of wince when I say that. But I'm always happy when the young people show up. Okay, this is a long setup. I'll try to get through it. So you were talking about your 2018 live concert, Surviving Twin, the song Half Fist. Awesome, lovely song about figuring out who your grandfather was through pictures and how he might be the same as your father in certain ways. And they make the same half fist, which I totally do in pictures. At the end, you sing, "Tell me what we are afraid of. Why do we resist? I spread my hand and flex my fingers, open and close my fist." Here's the question. As someone who has deduced the trials of your grandfather, observed the trials of your father, your own trials and your children's trials, how do you see the evolution and or dissolution of, like, I don't know if this this might be a terrible word, generational trauma in your family? Like, how do you see your children and their children coping differently with their own trials?
It's a huge and interesting question. In my particular case, and this has been referenced in the songs, and it's referenced in quite specifically in Half Fist about my grandfather. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family, and on both sides. My grandfather was an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic, and others. So that's one way that you deal with the trauma. It's not a very effective way of dealing with it, but it's people do it, reach for a drink or some other substance, and it's part of the legacy of my particular family, and I've written about it a lot. So yeah, suffering is passed on generationally. It makes sense because my parents bring into play their own childhoods, which were affected by the dysfunctional, addictive natures of their own parents. I mean, I don't want to get all crazy about this, but I think I believe it. I believe that it happens. I've observed it and I've experienced it. So that's enough of that.
Yeah, there's the line.
Yeah.
We found it. Okay, this is an easy one. There's a song on the new live album, All in a Family, about how families are messy and a work in progress. But I love the ending phrase, it's all in a family, that's no lie. It'll stay that way after we die. You forgive, you forget, and finally see when you get to hold the new baby.
Yeah.
So can you expand on that? What is it like for you to hold new babies in the family? How do you relate to the babies in your family?
Oh, well, we have a new baby. I'm actually looking off at her picture here.
Oh.
Her name is Hazel. She's my daughter Lucy's daughter. Lucy and her partner Jude's daughter. And God, what a thrill to! She's 2, so she's not a little baby, but I love holding her and seeing her and being around her, and it's certainly the main reason I go into the city now is to hang out with her for a couple of hours and be G-Pa. That's my title. I'm G-Pa. And she seems to like to see me. And yeah, when you get to hold a new baby, that's one of the big treats.
Your latest record is your new live record, Loudon Live in London. This is your 4th live album. Of your live shows, you've talked about how you can feel the personality of an audience. You mix it up between the serious and the funny, and you work to unsettle the audience to get them off guard so they just don't know what's next. What's it like for you when a crowd mixes up your intention? I've experienced this a lot of times where a musician is playing a song on stage, they say a line, and the audience laughs, and the next line indicates that, oh, that is not supposed to be funny. What is it like for you when a crowd mixes up your intention when they laugh when it's serious and vice versa?
Well, in a way, the audience's reaction trumps, I hate to use that word anymore. I don't want to use that word anymore. Overrides everything else. It's their, it's their, you are there for them. And so they're, I love it when there are songs of mine where there are jokes implanted in the songs as either comic relief or, as you say, to kind of unsettle the audience. But when an audience laughs at anything, I'm usually delighted. I don't get irritated or feel that it's the wrong reaction. It's for the audience, that's they're the paying customers, and they're entitled to their own reactions. So however they want to react is okay.
So a friend of mine has a song called "You Were Drunk," and it's a song about hooking up with somebody that you really like, but they only do it because you're drunk. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a sad song,
right?
But she does the first phrase, and then she says, "You were drunk and I was there." And then the audience goes, ha, ha, ha. And then the rest of the song is really sad. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like psychological warfare with the audience where the singer and the songwriter knows what they're doing mm-hmm. when they present that to the audience, and they kind of want this false reaction.
Yeah.
Do you ever experience that?
Yeah, I think that's a good dynamic. I mean, again, in a 3-minute song, you can take an audience to different places. Things can be funny and horrible at the same time, certainly in the same song. And I just used the word unsettle. I mean, I think that's an effective thing to do in a show or in a film or a play or maybe even a painting. I don't know much about painting, but you want the person that it's experiencing whatever it is that's being offered to be a bit unsettled, to be off guard, to be thrown, and in some cases even to be uncomfortable. I think it brings them in. That's my experience.
What unsettles you when you're an audience member? Like, what's the difference between, these might be two different questions, my reputation once again. What is the difference between unsettling and cringy?
Yeah, well, there has to be some discernment. I mean, when it gets to be cringy, I'll try to get out of the audience. But that's my, what cringes one person is doesn't cringe the next one. It's a good question. I don't quite know what the answer is.
Seems like unsettling is kind of like intentionally thoughtful and artful, and cringy is just sort of like shock factor.
Yeah, gratuitous is another. You don't want it to be just to shock or just to. Well, maybe in some cases you do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think about rock and roll in general. I guess that there's an element of shock in that too, which is intentional. And I don't know.
We're not going to figure it out today.
We're not figuring this one out today.
Congratulations, you just released the song President's Day 2025, which is actually today, the day that we are speaking, February 17th, 2025. This episode will be coming out a couple months from now. But in the song, you say, I'm queasy about President's Day. We got Donald again, I'm so sorry to say. In your book, Liner Notes, you talk about writing a song about Trump in 2016 when it was like still kind of funny, when it, it wasn't cringy yet. Mm-hmm. You stopped playing that song after it was no longer funny. You are a very direct writer, and that can be tough in political songs. What is your editing like when it comes to writing a political song? Like, do you try to be even more direct than usual in a political song?
I don't know. Right. I've written political songs or songs about, the big picture or certainly I've strayed away from my personal life and written about. I don't know. It's tricky. It's risky. I mean, but again, my rule for writing a song about anything is if I'm affected by it, if my mother dies, or if a marriage ends, or one of my kids has a baby, or somebody gets to be the big enchilada in some election, if it has an effect on me, invariably, or not invariably, but often I will write a song about it. And again, we talked about we mentioned the word gratuitous. With political stuff, you can be gratuitous. I mean, the President's Day song, which is I wrote President's Day. The first incarnation of that song was written during the George W. Bush administration. So I've kind of updated it because of the situation we're in now. But when I listen to it now, and I just recorded it 2 days ago, and we just put it up, recently. It's kind of a sad song, which is, shouldn't a political song be, yee? I don't know. I just wrote it and threw it up there on the thing and just see what people thought about it.
Do you feel like a kind of responsibility to your audience as a songwriter when it comes to like a political situation like we're in right now?
I guess I do. I mean, I'm of the generation, I grew up, I went to the Newport Folk. It's funny, the Bob Dylan movie is just out now. I was at that Newport Folk Festival show where he went electric, by the way. But, Pete Seeger and singing about ending the war or civil rights or, that was a part of my youth. And, I'm very self-absorbed and I write about my own life, but I do feel a certain responsibility to weigh in on some of this stuff because of I think it's a good thing to do.
Okay, what was Newport like when Dylan went electric, and how do you think they did at portraying it in the movie?
Well, it was an amazing show to be at, that particular one. I mean, as is portrayed in the movie, there were two people loved it and people didn't like it. I was in the group that loved it. I was thrilled when it happened. I thought they did an okay job in the movie. I'm not a big biopic fan. I would rather watch Don't Look Back. But Timothy Chalamet can sing and play, and Ed Norton is a great actor. I thought his performance as Pete Seeger was terrific. And the moving thing was, though, and this happened to me last night. I was watching. I know people are listening weeks after we're actually talking, but last night there was the 50th anniversary party of Saturday Night Live. I don't know if you watched it, but it ends with Paul McCartney singing in a kind of croaky voice, "Away Homeward," or whatever that, Once There Was a Time.
There Was a Time.
God, the song, just talking about it right now, it just tore me up. And in the Dylan song, and in the Dylan movie, when those songs, even when they're not sung by Dylan, they're so great. So as, that's great. So the Dylan movie is great because people are going to hear those songs. And who cares if Paul McCartney doesn't sing like he sang, or anybody? The Paul Simon song was also great. Those are gigantic work. That's great work. So
Which Paul Simon song did he sing?
He sang "Homeward Bound." The show opened with that, with a very young, up and coming, really good singer whose name escapes me. But it was a duet, and it was just terrific. To use my father's favorite adjective, it was just terrific.
Okay, let's do a quick lightning round, and then we can be on our way here.
Okay.
All right. What is your favorite bridge in Pittsburgh?
I'm blanking on the names of the bridge. What about the Liberty Tubes? The tunnel.
The tubes, right.
Well, let's go for a tunnel.
Really? The answer is the Smithfield Bridge. It's a beautiful old bridge with lights on it, and it's right by Station Square.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, this is a really important question. Did you ever swim in a Pittsburgh river?
I'm trying to think. I only was at Carnegie for a year and a half. I'm trying to think. Did I ever?
You do have a reputation.
Yeah, I know. Swimming was a big thing. To be honest, I don't think I ever swam in a Pittsburgh river, any of the three principal rivers.
Here's a tip. If you want to go swim in a Pittsburgh river, you got to go up the Allegheny.
Okay.
Away from the city. Then you could do it.
All right.
What is your sound check song?
It's funny you should mention that because it's an old I believe it Jimmy Rogers, the great yodeling brakeman Jimmy Rogers, who was a hero of mine. He has a song called "Arthritis Blues," and I've been singing it for 50 years. Arthritis is the thing to miss. It'll leave you walking with a double twist. And I'm going to get a hip replacement in, what month is it? May, because I've got chronic arthritis. So be careful about what you sing about.
Well, good luck. Okay, two more. Who is your celebrity crush?
Well, last night watching Saturday Night Live, one of the highlights was seeing Meryl Streep do a very funny bit with Kate McKinnon on the show. I actually there's a picture of me and Meryl Streep. My son Rufus was nominated for a Grammy, not this year, but the year before. So I went to the Grammys and Meryl Streep was there. And boy, standing and getting my picture taken next to Meryl Streep was pretty darn exciting. So I sent that one around. You can bet.
This is the last one. Where's the most beautiful place you've ever seen?
Well, I'm looking out my window now onto this wooded area called the Sachem Woods near where I live. And I sit up here pretty much every day. And I'd say from the look of it, it's the most beautiful place in the world at this moment.
Love that. Loudon Wainwright, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Cindy, and thank you so much for doing the work and listening to the songs and the records, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by Anthony Cabrera. Our music composed by Dietrich Strauss. Basic Folk is a production of the Bluegrass Situation. You can find all of our episodes there. You can search for Basic Folk on the SiriusXM app. Check us out on folkalley.com or Folk Alley's mobile app. You can also go to our website, basicfolk.com, or wherever you find your shows. If you enjoyed this episode, I suggest sharing it with a friend. Like perhaps that friend that you would watch Big Fish with over and over and over again, and you'd recreate the scene that Loudon Wainwright III was in, where he was mayor of this imaginary town where they just spin in a circle and smile and have a lot of fun. And you and your friend would just do that all the time after you'd watch Big Fish. Send this episode to that friend. And thanks for listening all the way to the end. You're very special, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.